Happy Halloween and welcome to episode 16 of Anglican Unscripted.
I'm George Conger, and I want to wish all our Hindi viewers in India Diwali ke Shubhka Manayin. Happy Diwali.
Wow, and I'm Kevin Carlson, and I'm up here at a friend's house, so you're going to hear some background noise today, and we just can't help that because a massive snowstorm has taken out all the power in Connecticut, and I have one friend with power, and he's now my bestest friend.
You know, Kevin, we've had to turn the air conditioning on down here in Florida. It's been hot today. But
you know, Alan Haley said the same thing in Oregon. Is the whole world against me?
Well, maybe we should film outside by the pool. Would that be better?
Okay, I'm going to hang up. Okay, George and I kind of have some breaking news for you, and actually it's breaking news and a developing story. Boy, if I could do a little sound break like they do for the 10 o'clock news, breaking news at 9, but we can't do that because this is all we got. George and I have kind of stumbled across a story that was forwarded to us, and we're going to talk about that in conjunction with another story. The other story is there's a new diocese by the Church of Nigeria that was put into Tennessee or Indianapolis. I don't know. What's the name of the new diocese, George?
Diocese of the Trinity.
Diocese of the Trinity.
And it's based out of Indianapolis.
Okay.
And the Cana Suffragan Bishop, Amos Fagbemi, I believe that's how his name is pronounced, he will be the diocesan bishop for this new diocese, which was announced on October 12th by Martin Minns,
right.
Bishop of Cana.
What's remarkable about this? Well, it didn't come from the Anglican Church of North America. It's another diocese from a foreign entity being formed here in America.
And it's a diocese for Nigerians.
Mm-hmm.
It's, in essence, a racially based, ethnically based diocese.
Right. And that's a problem. Now, we see stuff like this happening, and we saw it right from the very beginning of ACNA in June of 2009. Was it 8 or 9? A long time ago. When ACNA was formed, we saw the same type of thing. When Chuck Murphy came in, he announced that there's going to be 3 new bishops from EMEA to serve in ACNA. He did this without consulting Bishop Duncan or Bishop Martin Minns or anybody else. He just did this on his own accord. And so we see on the peripheral of ACNA things that are just incohesive. We want to give Archbishop Duncan his due here because he's been able to hold this cohesiveness together for a long time, but we really want to bring to light this for the people who don't realize what's going on, that ACNA as a brand new province is not struggling, but it has some growing pains. Starting a new province is not easy.
You're very right, and that there are some growing pains, and one of them is this lack of communication. Archbishop Duncan's press officer sent me his statement today about the new diocese, and Archbishop Duncan was completely behind it, supportive, and said that it was contemplated that there would be what are called affinity groups or affinity dioceses within ACNA. However, and so he's positive. However, the reader, the critic, was saying, well, yeah, the affinity dioceses were meant to be Anglo-Catholic, were charismatic, except for the Niobrara convocation, which is for the Indians in North and South Dakota, there weren't really going to be racial dioceses. And now we've got, for all intents and purposes, a Nigerian African diocese in the United States.
Right. And we've seen this with EMEA. It was a Rwanda mission in America. Cana was a Nigerian mission in America. And they were put here until there was a safe place for Anglicans to worship. Now, these same primates who formed EMEA and formed Cana showed up at a meeting in Jerusalem called GAFCON. And they asked Bishop Duncan and many other bishops to get together and said, if you're serious about wanting a province, you need to start one. And Archbishop Duncan gathered not just the bishops that were at GAFCON, but many more, all these common cause partners from the Reformed Episcopal Church to Cana to Nigeria. You know, you couldn't list them all. It's amazing all the people he brought together. And they said, yes, we want to have one single entity representing North America in Anglicanism because tech isn't doing the job. Okay.
And this new Nigerian diocese, I hate to say, even though in its organizing documents it says it's multicultural, multiracial, and is designed to evangelize people who don't know Christ, it's being done by the Church in Nigeria with Cana and ACNA following on, when it should really be done by Cana and ACNA saying, we would like to evangelize the 500,000 Nigerians in this country.
Yeah.
And then get the Church in Nigeria to come along and support it, not Nigeria initiating.
Right. Because here's the first question that comes to a reporter's mind. Do Nigerian Anglicans believe something different than American Anglicans believe? Do Rwanda Anglicans believe something different than American Anglicans believe? And the answer is no. Well, then does not Rwanda and Nigeria trust Archbishop Duncan? Well, based on what we see, we would have to say no. The evidence shows that there's either they're building their own kingdoms or they're not trusting the authority that was vested by the GAFCON primates into the Archbishop of the Anglican Church in North America.
I don't know if I would fully agree with you on the issue of trust. There is that element, but I think from my perspective, it is more communications. These guys just don't talk to each other to a degree that they should. There shouldn't be these sorts of surprises.
No. Well, and that's what you and I are going to learn a lot in the next week with a bunch of emails and phone calls. But one of the things we really want to, hold on, my phone's a-buzzing. One of the things you and I really want to put out here is there's even more breaking news this week that you and I have learned about. We've had several sources contact us about some stuff going on in Pawleys Island. Apparently there's some discord going on between the Church of Rwanda and Bishop Murphy, where they're coming to some terms of separation. Bishop Murphy has decided that he wants to support women's ordination and that he wants to be able to appoint his own bishops without Rwanda having the ability to nix any of his decisions. And, you know, this is something brand new and exclusive to us, but that could be very troubling.
Yes, and that how it's working out is it looks like the AMIA is going to pull out from Rwanda and either seek another primate from another Global South church, or maybe ask retired Archbishop Emmanuel Collini to lead them, or maybe another option we really haven't thought of. I've talked to the GAFCON secretary in Sydney and asked them about this, saying, can you tell me, is there any policy or rule about picking up a new province? And the answer was, no, we don't have anything hard and fast, but essentially we didn't think it was necessary anymore. We'd passed that point.
Yeah, and you know, that's kind of what I talked about before with trust, is are we past that point? So if AMIA all of a sudden does not have a archbishop that's sponsoring them, what happens to them as an entity?
Well, Chuck Murphy is a charismatic fellow, and I'm sure he'll keep a lot of the people together and keep on doing what they're doing, but they won't be part of the Anglican world the way they have been through their connection to Rwanda, unless they want to come in under ACNA.
Right. And now what happens now you and I originally heard about this story because there's discord amongst the bishops. There are many bishops who, because Rwanda will no longer be sponsoring AMIA, they want to leave AMIA and join ACNA. What happens if he loses a portion of his AMIA?
Well, if we look at history, I think there have been disaffiliations from AMIA. The biggest one was Christ Church, David Roseberry in Plano, Texas. And they essentially left AMIA for ACNA over the women's ordination issue.
Mm-hmm.
They were for it. And at that time, AMIA and still does not have women clergy.
Right.
Now we're seeing a shift at the top echelons of AMIA in favor of women clergy, and there will be that portion of people who say, no, we're not for that. And if they go into ACNA, they can go into organizations and dioceses that do not have women clergy. So they'll be able to preserve key elements of their ecclesiology by moving sideways into ACNA. And they've done it, AMIA has allowed it in the past, so they may allow it in the future.
Now, you and I should also be forthcoming. We love Bishop Mins, we love Bishop Murphy, we love Archbishop Duncan. We're not being critical. We just want to put this to light, and we want, some answers. These are important questions for a new province that's forming. And, we can't always be in this limbo of, are we going to be offending Cana? Are we going to be offending AMIA? Are we going to be offending the REC? As a news organization, can we talk plainly about what's happening and about what we see?
Hey, well, I've been offending the Episcopal Church for 20 years, and I still have my little piece of plastic.
Yeah, you have your piece of plastic because you're still in tech. I'm the one who's going to get in trouble here. But, here, let's back up. If we're wrong in this story in any way, you're welcome to correct us. Send us an email, or we'll do a video Skype and allow you to correct us or to help us more understand what we don't see in the light here. I put very succinctly that I wonder if it's a trust issue. George put it very succinctly, maybe a communication issue. Let us know which it is. Okay, George and I are going to bring you some over-the-pond news. This is breaking news from today. As you probably all know, that Giles Fraser from St. Paul's Cathedral had resigned earlier this week. He was not the dean. What was he there, George?
Canon Chancellor.
Canon Chancellor. And I'm not going to explain clergy structure to you now, but that's pretty high up. Today we learned that the dean...
He wrote the checks.
He wrote the checks. The dean, Graham Knowles, has resigned. And in any other day, any other place, this wouldn't be big news, except for why they resigned, how they resigned, and who responded. But first, let's talk about St. Paul's Cathedral. If I remember correctly, there was a big fire in London not too long ago, and this church was built after that.
Yes. 17th century, Great Fire of London, designed by Sir Christopher Wren. It's in the city of London, near the Stock Exchange, and it's in the financial district. It's sort of on the other side of town from Houses of Parliament, Westminster Abbey, Buckingham Palace, and so forth.
In fact, it's the one you see in Mary Poppins where they dance up and down the stairs there. Now, what's remarkable here is the Rowan Williams came out with a quote because he was upset. He didn't say anything about Giles Fraser stepping down, but when Graham stepped down, he said, the events of the last couple of weeks have shown very clearly how decisions made in good faith by good people under unusual pressure can have utterly unforeseen and unwelcome consequences, and the clergy of St. Paul's deserve our understanding in these circumstances. That would be a good retort if they were fired. But, George, they weren't fired, were they?
No, they both resigned, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
Now, I started this show with a Diwali greetings to our Hindi viewers in India. All three of them, I think. Diwali is the Hindu festival of lights. And why I raised that was an inside joke between Kevin and myself, because this Occupy London, Occupy Wall Street has been a group of anarchists, agitators, the great unwashed, hippie, so-and-sos. You can tell where I'm coming from on that issue.
Yes.
They've been camped outside.
Wannabes, yes.
They've been camped outside St. Paul's Cathedral with the permission of Giles Fraser for about 10 days now. And the Archbishop of Canterbury has done nothing, while every single day the Church of England is made to look foolish and muddle-headed and inconsiderate. And finally, at the end of last week, the chapter of the cathedral, which are the Board of Trustees or its vestry, And the dean said, look, we got to get rid of these protesters. The cathedral shut down. We're losing $20,000 a day in income from the gift shop and tourists. People can't come to church here on Sundays. We have the National Remembrance Day, November 11th, to remember the war dead. That takes place at St. Paul's Cathedral, and we can't have that service with all these hippies outside. Mm-hmm. These guys got to go. And Giles Fraser quit, saying, I'm not going to allow violence to be used in the name of the church. Well, he should tell military chaplains about that. But and then today, Monday, the dean quit because he's been pilloried by the liberal press for not sticking up for poor Giles Fraser, who caused all of this mess.
Yeah. And well, we want to talk about communications problems. Now, the problem isn't that Giles Fraser's liberal. He is, but I think he's more of a publicity person. He's, this is a great chance to have his name show up on the papers, and boy, did it.
Yeah, and also, he's not the boss.
No.
The dean is Graham Knowles, and Giles Fraser told the police to go away without consulting with the dean of the chapter. He made a decision that he wasn't empowered to make. Mm-hmm. And now the deans had to clean it up, and the deans had to take the knife for Fraser's inconsiderate actions.
Yes. Actually, in the next segment, you're going to see Peter Old and I talk a little bit more about this. Peter Old and I taped 2 days ago before Graham Knowles stepped down, and he has a lot of interesting stuff to talk about Graham Fraser. Another developing story, because Occupy Wall Street is pretty much shut down because of the snowstorm, but Occupy London's still going strong.
Yeah, and if you read some of the British press coverage, the tide is turning against these people. The sympathy is no longer there. There are clouds of marijuana smoke rising above these tents. The people are urinating and defecating against the walls of St. Paul's Cathedral. Mm-hmm. And these are not righteously indignant poor people marching on the power to get back their jobs. These are professional agitators who go from protest to protest to protest. And this is what they do for a living.
And it's even different than the environment we have here in America. Here in America, it's mostly comprised of students who want their loans paid. Over in London, it is the agitators, the people who beat up people at football matches, and hooligans, they call them. But it's going to be a nice, interesting story that obviously we're going to have to follow up on.
But it's again, George Pitcher, who used to be the Archbishop of Canterbury's publicity director, mm-hmm. And he was fired, left at the beginning of September, because he was too good at his job, and the Archbishop of Canterbury's staff were a little worried that George Pitcher was pushing them into the 21st century. Pitcher was interviewed by the Independent newspaper and said, this has been an utter public relations fiasco and disaster. And George Pitcher is absolutely right. And Rowan Williams, on cue, 10 days too late, says something that is a rather weenie statement, saying, oh, can't we just all get along? A Rodney King statement after the riots have taken place.
Now, are you hinting that Rodney King is the new communications director for Church of England?
Well, I think he could do a better job than the people they have now.
I think that's a good way to end that. Happy Halloween.
Yeah, happy light party to you.
How are you doing?
I'm well. I'm all right, actually. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I was trimming through the news, and I'm not a regular reader of the Huffington Post, but I saw an article in there by the great Peter Old.
They asked me to do a blog post. I did one. It's quite good, actually. Yeah, sparky.
It was great, but it was right listed under do Republicans hate their children?
Do vicars eat babies?
That's right. So you're in good company, but you talked a little bit about what's happening over at St. Paul's and Occupy London Exchange and stuff like that. Give me the lowdown on your. You guys kind of have a mini Woodstock without the music going on over there.
Yeah, and with probably as much pot. So what happened was we had our own version of Occupy Wall Street, which is Occupy London Stock Exchange. Problem is, the London Stock Exchange is next door to St. Paul's Cathedral and on a square called Paternoster Square. But Paternoster Square is a private square. It's not a public thoroughfare. So the Occupy London Stock Exchange people wanted to set up camp in Paternoster Square, like they've done in Wall Street, but the Stock Exchange got an injunction out against them, so they couldn't get in. So they turned up at the start of their protest with police across the front of Paternoster Square, so they couldn't go anywhere. So they just pitched their tents where they were, which was right next door to St. Paul's Cathedral. Mm-hmm. So we've got the Occupy London Stock Exchange camp next door to St. Paul's Cathedral. The story in terms of how it affects the Church of England begins with the Canon Chancellor of St. Paul's, Giles Fraser, appearing on the cathedral steps. They're the ones that you see in the movie Mary Poppins. If you've never been here, feed the birds tuppence a bag, except in these inflationary times, sort of £5.50 a bag. And he basically turned to them and said, "This is, we are basically happy to have you guys here, and we think that the protest is a good idea." It appears, though, that Giles Fraser, and I'll talk a bit more about him shortly, it appears that he didn't talk to his cathedral dean, the Right Reverend Graham Knowles, who is a bishop, but he is the cathedral dean, happens, and who took a slightly different stance. And by the end of the week, what you had was the St. Paul's Cathedral closing because of so-called health and safety issues involved with having a camp with all the kind of things that camps have right next door to the cathedral, which has approximately thousands of people coming to see it every day.
Now, what is the makeup of this? Well, obviously, when you have that many people together, they have a central message, and they know what they want. What do these Occupy London people want?
I have no idea. I went down there right at the start, almost broke my leg falling over a guy rope for a tent. I think that was part of the problem at the start. It was fairly higgledy-piggledy. There were health and safety issues. By the time the cathedral closed, it had all been reordered and a lot safer. And the problem in what the cathedral said in terms of health and safety issues was it didn't actually lay out what the health and safety issues were. It may have been an issue of public liability. So this is technically St. Paul's courtyard. Bits of it belong to St. Paul's. Bits of it belong to the Corporation of the City of London, which would require a whole other video to explain that one. Well, but essentially, they were probably scared that if something happened to somebody, they would be liable.
Well, and that's many of the issues. Is one, they don't have permits like a normal. If here in America, if the Tea Party wanted to hold an event, they'd have to get a permit. But if you show up without an idea who you want, what you want, and just gather, you don't need a permit.
Yeah. Well, it's slightly different here because technically the protesters are trespassing, but nobody's done anything about the trespass. But the real issue for the Church of England isn't the protesters. That's almost like a side issue. It's Giles Fraser. Now, Giles Fraser currently having now resigned as Canon Chancellor. Giles Fraser is one of the scions of the liberal movement, the inclusivists in the Church of England. He's fondly known as the effing Vicar of Putney. I won't clarify that for you.
You've been reading his tweets.
Well, it's not quite that, but he is slightly famous for not being terribly incautious with some of the language he uses. And I think what basically happened to him was that he goes on the steps of St. Paul's Cathedral and says one thing, and then his dean comes out a few days later and says, well, actually, this is now a bad thing having the protesters here. And what essentially he did, though some people might argue, but I think it's very clear what he did was that he undermined from the word go the collegiality of the cathedral chapter. Mm-hmm. And that's just a mistake in terms of your public relations. If you're doing PR, what you want to have is one message, one voice. So by Giles Fraser coming out and talking to the media before the cathedral had even agreed what its line was, that was a big mistake. So ostensibly he's resigned because the cathedral with the Corporation of the City of London are moving to evict the protesters. But underneath that, there's this sense that actually, though some people would disagree. Giles Fraser overstepped the mark. He is not in charge of St Paul's Cathedral. He should have checked with his boss first before making any public statement, whether on the record or off the record. He should have checked before he made a public statement about what he thought about the camp.
Now, this is under the Bishop of London, right?
This is, well, yeah, it is in London Diocese. The home of the Bishop of London and the office that he works from is literally 200 meters down the road. So it's all happening on his doorsteps. Of course, as you know, English cathedrals are practically a law unto themselves, or at least a few canons unto themselves in the canons of the Church of England. So cathedrals can basically operate pretty much as they want to. Mm-hmm. So but here's another example how the Church of England has got its PR just completely wrong. On Wednesday, when it was announced that St Paul's Cathedral would reopen on Friday, the Bishop of London wrote a column in the Evening Standard, which is a London evening newspaper, which is now free, so everybody who works in London reads it. And he basically said, look, on Sunday morning he'll be there with the Dean on the cathedral steps, and they'll if the protesters agree to move, they'll be happy to talk about the issues and moving forward. It's a week too late. It's entirely reactive to what's going on. The time for a column like that should have been a week earlier. It should have been the cathedral and the diocese being proactive in setting the news cycle, not reacting to it.
Now, I understand that a certain person had to resign over this, or I think he was forced to resign, but it seems that he's going with the I'm leaving on my own.
He basically said, if the protesters are forcibly evicted, I will resign. But you know what? He would never have had to have said that if he hadn't stood on the cathedral steps and said these guys are good to stay. Sure. And my understanding is, though I can't confirm this, but sources tell me that the Dean and the Canon Chancellor have not got on very well since they started working together. So essentially, this is a good reason for Giles Fraser to leave. And you know what? He'll be fine. He'll be absolutely fine. He's got his column for Church Times. He appears on for the Day on Radio 4 just to wind all his conservatives up. There are some big liberal churches coming up with appointments. We've got St Martin in the Fields on Trafalgar Square, from which Nick Holton has gone to be the bishop in Salisbury. So there's a vacancy there. He'll find a job. He'll be fine.
A liberal vicar in London has a job, yes. Oh,
he'll find a job. He's fine. What I very much doubt now is that some people were talking about Giles Fraser being appointed as Dean of Southwark Cathedral. I don't think that's. I don't think there's any chance now of that happening. And furthermore, the people who are talking about him being a bishop are just not getting it at all. I don't think Giles Fraser, he's a bit like me. He's on the edge, he's quirky, he says exactly what he means, and he says what everybody else is thinking but is afraid to say. And so I know I'm never going to be in purple because of that. And I think that's the same for Giles Fraser.
Now, what's happening now with the people, the protesters? Where are they?
Well, the protesters are still there, protesting against what we don't know, but they're there protesting. What will happen next is that it's really complicated because St Paul's Courtyard belongs to St Paul's Cathedral. A bit of it belongs to the Corporation of the City of London, which goes back hundreds of years. Google is your friend. That is an amazing legal minefield. They are basically moving to get rid of them. So they will issue an eviction notice and then they will enforce it. And you know what? That's going to be great TV. So here they are. the protesters are doing nothing wrong apart from probably having a bit too much cannabis, and the police or bailiffs come and move them on from the steps of the cathedral. Great, I mean, great PR. You just cannot write it better.
We saw from the London riots that the police can be rather aggressive.
Yeah. Now, I don't know how it's going to work because it's private property. Even though people walk through it every day and treat it like a public thoroughfare, it's actually private property. So you probably need to get a firm of bailiffs in to do it, and there are certain rules around that and so on. So I frankly, I think they'll just turn up in the middle of the night and and chew them off. There were some newspaper reports saying that only about a quarter of the tents actually have people sleeping in them.
Well, I'm going to let you go.
Yes.
I'm betting you're not going to have next week off.
Well, I'm actually working in the city at the moment. I work for a even though I'm obviously ordained, I actually work for a risk consultancy, and I'm working for a bank at the moment in the city. So I'm probably going to pop over there a few times this week. It's actually, the campus actually got quite a bit of a nice vibe to it, but it's going to be very interesting seeing what. It's quite chilled out. It's like it's like a Christian festival, but with slightly less Jesus.
Wow.
So, but I'm gonna head over there, see what's going on, and we'll take it from there.
All right, thank you, Peter, and we'll see you
soon.
All
right, mate. God bless.
Okay, I'm calling from the frozen tundra here in Connecticut, and I'm talking on the other end of the country to Ellen Haley. Happy Halloween, Ellen.
Oh, thank you. And it's a sunny, balm, 75-degree day here.
You're not helping, Ellen. So I just wanted to catch up with you. There's been some breaking news with presiding Bishop Catherine Jefferts Schori and her previous job as Bishop of Nevada. Apparently, as we've been talking about with George and I think we brought you into one of the conversations, she brought into her employment a person who was an accused pedophile for all intents and purposes. And what's going on, and what have we learned recently?
Well, actually, it was more than a month ago that another victim of the pedophile abuse in the Catholic Church, a man by the name of Patrick Marker, who's up in the Seattle area, had been investigating charges of other abuse, and the abuses committed by this Father Bede Perry at a school up in Minnesota came to his attention, and he found out that Bede Perry was at the time a member of this monastery in Missouri. So he started investigating all the charges on it, and at that abbey, and found more instances of Bede Perry's violations and violations by other monks too. So he confronted Bede Perry and got him finally to admit what had gone on, and I think he was instrumental in having Bede Perry resign. But meanwhile, Bede Perry had been received by Catherine Jefferts Schori into her diocese in 2004 with what seems to be although it was a long period of time, there just doesn't seem to have been any substantive investigation of any kind, because the kinds of charges that Mr. Parker was able to uncover, Bede Perry admits that when Catherine Jefferts Schori interviewed him, he lied to her and only told her about one instance of prior abuse in 1987. And she apparently talked to his employer, his abbot at the time, and also was sent a copy of the report done in 2000. Both of these would have shown multiple prior violations. And so the big unanswered question here is, why did she go forward with his reception if the evidence was in front of her that he had lied to her?
Yeah, and that's the big thing here is there is documentation that was given to her that showed on previous occasions, not just once, that he had violated and broke the law, that he had been in counsel not once but more than once, and she had this documentation given to her.
Well, that's the discrepancy. The Catholics say that they sent it to her, and of course the lawsuit that was filed in Missouri over an instance of abuse there also alleges that it was sent to her. So they must have some written proof that it was sent to her. But Bishop Dan Edwards, the current diocesan of Nevada, put out a statement last July saying he has looked at the files and there's no such report in the files. So, that still doesn't mean that it wasn't sent and that wasn't read at the time. But the question is, it should have raised all kinds of red flags. The other thing about it was the report was dated in 2000. Bede Parry was admitted received as a priest in 2004. And the canons in effect back then required the presiding bishop to get an updated psychological profile if the recent one or the one in his file was older than 3 years. So this was older than 3 years in 2004, and she was obliged by the canons to get an updated psychological profile on him according to those canons. And there's no record of that. Don Edwards doesn't say that there's any updated profile in his file, just says that everything was quote-unquote done by the book. Well, it doesn't appear that it was done that way at all.
Well, now, you and I have discussed this many times, that many times the law just can't go into the canons of the church and make decisions. Is this something that if they're sued that they would have to reveal if it were true?
That's another thing that Bede Parry said in an interview this last summer with the Kansas Star. He said, I talked to Bishop Jeffrey Shorey. I didn't tell her about anything other than the 1987 incident. She said she would have to go check the canons. She did, and then she told me there was no problem.
Okay.
So we know she checked the canons.
Yeah.
We know she had to work with the diocesan council and her standing committee in order to receive him as a priest. There's been some talk that he had already been defrocked by the Catholic Church, and that's not correct. He was just suspended and then put on leave from his monastery and not allowed to rejoin it. But he was never actually a defrocked priest in the Catholic Church.
So now, as a lawyer, what gives you red flags here from Bede Parry?
Well, as I say, the fact that he would lie in the course of his application and lie on such a significant matter. So that has to be something that would be checked out further, and it apparently was checked out, and then the evidence was downplayed or ignored. And so we need a public accounting. Catherine Jefferts Schori thus far has refused to make any public statement on this matter. I don't know if she's been questioned about it in any of the news conferences, but nothing has come to my attention. And so there needs to be an open accounting on this, because this is not what the Episcopal Church promises to be, in contrast to the Catholic Church. And it needs to be openness. And even those on the left, Jim Naughton at Episcopal Cafe, for example, are calling for her to make a clean breast of this. She's the one who has the facts. She knows what she was told. She knows what she read, and she knows what was in the file. And so we would do best to hear directly from her.
That's going to be interesting, because this is one of the many things we find is that there's not a lot of transparency going on from 815, and if there's even a further cover-up in Nevada, that's going to have serious implications.
Yes, that has serious implications, and as I say, the longer this goes on without being openly addressed by the persons who were most directly involved, and that's the abbot at Conception Abbey, the presiding bishop, then the Diocesan of Nevada, and Bede Parry himself. And Bede Parry has made his statements. He's full and openly confessed to the reporters in the newspaper, and he's resigned his post at All Saints in Las Vegas. So he's no longer got anything to fear. And meanwhile, it's we need to hear from the abbot, who's of course being sued by someone else who was abused, and his monastery rather is being sued. But he could make a statement about what he told to Catherine Jefferts Schori and what he sent her. And then, of course, she should come clean with what happened. So then we would have it all in the open. We could all look at it and see what actually took place.
Well, I want to thank you again for your time, Alan. And we're going to, this is going to be a big story coming this fall. And you and I will be talking about this a lot, along with the church finances. But thank you for your time, and I'm so sorry you have such warm weather when it should be so cold like it is here.
Well, we'll get our share of it, no worry.
All right. God bless, my friend.
All right, thank you.
All right, that was episode 16. Hopefully in the next couple of days I can get back to the Anglican TV studio. Until then, I want to thank the Dowling family for allowing me to host Anglican TV in their nice living room, which is a lot better than the Anglican TV studio. Okay, now we've done our work. George and I, we've talked and hashed out news. We brought you exclusive news, breaking news. Now it's your job. Your job is to, even if you didn't like the program, spread the word. Tell your friends about us. If you loved us, send an email. Say, hey, you gotta check out this new show called Anglican Unscripted. If you hate us, do this just to spite us. Send out emails to all your friends saying, hey, we love this new show called Anglican Unscripted. But George, why should they really contact us and spread the word?
So that we can know what is of interest in moving across the Anglican world. Mm-hmm. We're picking up more non-Episcopal Church issues. We're picking up things in the wider Anglican communion. We're looking overseas simply because we're responding to the information, the requests, the suggestions that you all send us.
Mm-hmm. And that's the great thing about this is the news we brought you this week was mostly brought to you by viewers like you who sent us information.
Exactly. I mean, in other words, we know about the AMIA splits and divisions because people who watch the show tell us, say, you need to investigate this.
So, all right, that ends the story. Thank you much.